Okay, guys, this is a quick tutorial on how to get started with your 3D house. As I've said, you need to really keep this simple. And you should go find reference images so you're not guessing, right? And then come up with a plan as to what you want to build. I've looked at all of these four reference images that I brought in, added to an image plane, and put in a layer so I can hide them and reference them if I need to. And at the end of the day, I'm going to build something that's sort of a combination of all of these. It's going to look more like this one over here on the right with a central door, which is obviously a rectangle, a couple windows on the side. I'm not going to have one up top. And then looking at this drawing, I want one window on one side and one window on the other. And then I'm going to put a chimney like in the back somewhere. I'll come up with that later. But just to get started, you have to have an idea of where you're going. So, and remember, at the end of the day, you're going to end up with something like this. Okay, so this is somebody's from last year. I'm not sure why that roof is wiggling. I think I might know, but it's really not worth getting into right now. But that's what we want to end up with, right? A house, a fence, a ground, a walkway, some sort of sidewalk, and then we have some paint effects that we'll get into later. So let's get started with this house. As I said, I'm going to start with a cube. I'm going to create a door in the front, two side windows on the front face, and then a window on each side of the house. So I'm going to start with polygon cube. I'm just going to throw it out there and see what it looks like. And then I'm going to adjust, going into my attribute editor, the size of this thing. So we have a width of 20. That looks a little bit wide to me. Let's go with 16. Then I'm going to have a depth. Let's do a depth of 20. Pretty long house. Height looks pretty good for now. And we're going to build this house out of this cube, basically. Now, again, I have to anticipate where I'm going. So I know I need a rectangle in the middle of this space because I'm going to do some extruding to make a frame, make a door. It's got to be elevated. I want to make some steps coming off of the bottom. So a lot of different ways of doing this, a bunch of different tools you can use. I can sit here and I can play with subdivisions like that and get sort of the start of a rectangle. If I go to subdivisions height and go with 3, I now have, I'm going to do that as well here. Let's go with 3, 3, and 3. Now I've got sort of squarish rectangles that I can at least start with to get this thing going. So let's work on the door first. So I'm going to go to my front view, and I'm going to select by, I'll try to use my modeling toolkit so you guys can see what I'm selecting by. I'm going to select by verts, and I'm going to select all of them all the way through my house. And again, I'm trying to make this center rectangle more of a door-looking rectangle. So I'm going to go with scale, and my door I want to be about that width. Then I'm going to select all of these, and I want my door to be maybe those dimensions there, but it's too high up. So now if I just move all of that edge loop down to about where I could start some stairs, that'll be, let's go about right there. Okay, now we got to look at what happened. So because I selected all the way through, my entire cube is pretty symmetrical. All right, and again, I want some side windows. Okay, so we can do that right away. Generally speaking, if you look at these reference images, the top of the windows are generally in line with the top of the doors. So we can still use those edge loops. I'm looking at all of these trying to see if I'm incorrect on that, but they all look to be true. So we can use these edge loops to create windows. Let's do the side windows. So I'm going to go to the right side. And again, I'm going to select these edge loops all the way through. I'm going to scale them together to get like the width of my window. Now we sort of have a problem because if I select all of these and move them around, well, that's going to change where my door is, right? So again, that maybe looks like a little bit too wide of a window. I'm going to move, I want my windows more towards the front, so I'm looking, this is positive X. I'm going to move that there. I can add more, if I want to add more windows later, I can add edge loops, or I can use my my cut, slice, and insert edges on Polygon tool, which is a valuable tool we'll get into in a little bit. So this is a basic good start to where we want to go. Now, sometimes when we're dealing with modeling in 3D, we have an idea of where we want to go. We think we know the tools that we can use and that will work for where we want to go, but sometimes they just don't work, so you have to keep trying different things. So I'm looking at this. I really want to establish my windows here. Again, I could do this later if we want. I'm going to see if I can get some windows fleshed out right now. What happens if I go to Insert Edge Loop? Okay, I know that I want this front to be symmetrical, so I might think about going into turning my symmetry. Let's try Object X. Sometimes this is a little confusing, so it takes some trial and error. So my Object X, and then I go to Insert Edge Loop, and let's see if it'll let me. Yeah, it'll let me insert edge loop right there. So I'm going to create one there, again working symmetrically, and let's do another one there. So a couple wide windows. Obviously, they're really tall. I mean, I could do that if we want. I'm visualizing more windows that are not as tall as the door. So that would mean if I have to move my edges up, I can. I'm going to leave that alone for now and think about that one later, because I want everything to be sort of squared up right now. Now, again, I've got some things in place where I can start doing some extruding and detailing some things out. So let's start with that door. I like to use extrude on this because I want to create a door frame. Now, if you look at our reference images, some of these references have door frames, some don't. This is a CG house, so it doesn't look like they put a frame in there. They just sort of kicked the door inward. This one's real far inward. It does have a frame on it. This one doesn't have a frame. This one I think has a frame. It's a little bit hard to see, but yeah, it's got a little frame around it. I'm looking at more of something like that. And I want my windows to have that same sort of framework as well because of stylization. So let's go and select the face. And I'm going to take symmetry off at this point. So I don't want anything to happen on any other sides, which shouldn't happen because I'm in the middle of my cube, but you never know. So now I'm going to go up to my extrude button. If you don't have this on your shelf, you should add it under Edit Mesh, Extrude, Control Shift, and click to create that extrusion function. I'm going to extrude, and for some reason that's taking a little longer than I wanted to, but now I want to scale from the middle. And as always with this gizmo that comes up that has both all the move, rotate, and scale options, I don't have a center cube from which I can scale. So I have to activate my scale by clicking on any of the cubes that have shown up. And now I get this light blue one and I can scale inward. Okay, now you can see I've got the beginnings of a frame. I'm looking at my sides. I want that frame a little bit bigger. That looks good. Now, because of the nature of scaling rectangles inward like that, the top of the frame and the bottom of the frame are a little bit thicker than the sides. So I can just grab my scale in Y and sort of, I'm just eyeballing this and making those a little bit smaller, somewhere around there. Okay. Now I want to extrude again because I want to push this door inward. So as it's selected, I'm going to extrude again. And if I push it back, it gives me a little bit of depth there. I can always move that back a little more later. But I also want my frame to pop out a little bit. And right now it's flush with the side of that wall, which is not what we want. So I'm going to select all four. I'm holding down Control and Shift to add to my selection. All four of those frame edges, and I'm again going to do another extrusion. I'm going to extrude all four of those at the same time, just by a little bit. There we go. And if I get out of component mode, go back to object mode, and I deselect my house, we can see that I've got a cool little start right there with that framework. Sometimes I like to work with wireframe on shaded, so I'll click on that to keep an eye on my wireframe when I'm in shaded mode. Oh, that looks pretty good. Now in my mind, I have to make decisions on how I want to work. Again, I like how everything is symmetrical and all the lines are straight. You know, I've got horizontal edges and vertical edges. But I really want to build these windows out in the front before I jump over to the side. So I'm making the decision in my head, and I hope this works. It might not, but I am going to turn my symmetry back on and select that bottom edge and move it up to about the size that I want those windows. So when I say that, I'm talking about these faces here. And again, I'm working with symmetry on, so hopefully I can build the left and right window at the same time and make them perfect. So now let's try an extrusion, see what happens. We get this little odd manipulator here with the arrow that obviously we can pull out, but we don't want to do that yet. We need to create that internal window pane and the frame. So I'm going to scale, boom, from the middle. Now we're going to, again, extrude again and push it back a little bit because windows recess a little bit. And now, as you can tell, this is the same technique I used for the door. They're just windows, a little different shape. I'm going to extrude those frames a little bit to pop them out from that window. Now again, if I get out of component mode, I'm going to turn my wireframe on shaded on. I've got the beginnings of windows. You can use that same technique back here. You could actually do something like select all of these if we want the windows to be aligned almost perfectly, the same height. If I go to my front view and zoom way in here, I can sort of see this edge right here is not straight. So if I bump it up until I see no more little kinks in it, that's almost perfect straight across. That's a little high. Doesn't have to be perfect, guys, but we want to try to get it close. Now I have the beginning of the side windows. Now we have this back part that may or may not be a problem. We can leave it for now, address it later. But again, this is a good, solid start to creating a house with some windows on it.